Okay, so I can see here that my drawing is in metric because there's zeros and 50s, nice clean increments, no fractions. If I, when I want to make those changes are applied to the document. So no matter what computer I'm using, I could have multiple documents open. I can have one open in Imperial. I can have one in metric. I could have another one in Imperial. So those settings are applied to the document, and then we find and make those changes in the document settings. So before we did Vectorworks preferences, again, that's Vectorworks under the Vectorworks menu. This time our document settings are under the file menu. So if I go file, I scroll down, I can see document settings. Now there's a sub menu there, and there's document preferences, there's units, georeferencing, document setup. There's two places to kind of change the scale in units. Obviously, units here, I can click on my units and I can change the units here. So right now, as I was saying, it was in metric, and the standard units for metric is millimeters. So there's a drop-down menu right here, and I can change the units that I'm using. So if we're using metric, we're most often going to be using millimeters. If we're using imperial, we're most often going to be using feet and inches. Vectorworks is really great. You can set up your document to one unit type of measurement, and it recognizes all the other ones as well. I will be going over that more in depth when we start drawing. So here I can change feet and inches. It changes all these measurements here, so it gets into rounding style, the precision of our drawings, of our measurements. This is just for length. There's also area, volume. So if we change if you wanted to, you could leave them in different units. But in this case, I want to do square feet, and I can even do cubic feet. There's also dual dimensions. So when we are, say for instance, creating site plans, we want to show both our imperial and metric measurements. So that's where we can do dual dimensions. So this is at feet and inches because our primary units were previously metric in millimeters. So we don't want our dual dimensions to be the same. So this case we'll change that back to millimeters. We will practice this, and every drawing we create, we will be setting up. So this is just kind of an overview of where things are located and how to make those changes. I'm going to hit OK. So you can see now I changed those units to feet and inches, and look at my ruler bars on the top and on the side. The units have changed. So see how everything's in 1 inch. If I scroll in, half inches, fractions. If I scroll out, it starts going into feet and inches measurements. Okay. So again, I'm going to go back in. So I hit OK and it made those changes, but I still want to make other changes. So I go into File, Document Settings. This time I'm going to go to Document Setup. So if I go over to Document Setup, a Document Setup dialog box pops up. I can see, because I made those changes, it says my drawing units are in feet and inches. I can hit Change, and that brings me back into my units dialog box. There's always multiple ways of doing things and locating things in Vectorworks. I will be going over, I'll try and go over each way, because there's going to be instances where you're going to want to choose one way of doing things and instances where you want to use the other way. So there isn't just oh, this is the only way of doing things. there's always multiple ways in life and in Vectorworks. So again, I hit that, I got into that units dialog box again by hitting the change under my drawing units. I'm in my document setup dialog box, and under my drawing units, I can see that there's a layer scale. So I can hit change, and that's where that scale that I was talking about. So here there's imperial, here there's metric and engineering, and here's enlargement. We're going to be focusing on the top two, and like I was saying, we want to make this a 1/4 inch scale to a foot. I can see that it changes the paper scale to 1/48. So like I was saying, when 1/4 inch scale in imperial is close to 1/50 in metric, it's actually 1/48. So I can hit OK. So I have my feet in inches, I have my layer scale at 1/48 or 1/4 inch to a foot. I can also change my drawing area, which brings me to my page setup dialog box. This, you can also get to this another way, but this is how we get to it this way. So this page setup, I'm just going to cancel both right now. You can see in my drawing pane, I have this grade box rectangle and a grid system within it. Okay, that is my page. And now at this point, it's kind of irrelevant, but it's just kind of a marker for us and a bit of a guide. So right now I am going to go into File, back into File, Document Settings, Document Setup. Changing my drawing area again breaks me back into Page Setup. I want to go into click the Printer Setup button, and that brings my page setup for paper size. So I can click on my paper size. Right now it is set at US letters, so 8.5 by 11 in a portrait orientation, and that's why it was a vertical rectangle. Your sheet, the piece of paper I gave you is tabloid or 11 by 17, and it's in a landscape orientation. So I want to click on my paper size, and I want to go and select tabloid or 11 by 17. And then I want to change my orientation from portrait into landscape, and I can hit OK. And you can see when I did that, it still takes me back into my page setup dialog box, and the width is my printable area is 16.5 by 10.5. That's because it subtracted the margins, so that 11 by 17, my printable area of that sheet is only actually 16.5 by 10.5. Okay, so there's pages here, and there's one horizontal and one vertical. That's what we want. But I can piece together and actually do multiple pages if I wanted to. I'm just going to hit OK to show you what that looks like. So in that case, I changed it to 11 by 17 and a landscape. So that's an 11 by 17 page in this landscape. But I also changed it so that there was 4 horizontal and 4 vertical. So, you know, when you used to print things out on old printers and you tape them together to make a large banner, that's kind of what's happening here. You can do that. Eventually, when we send out our printing, we're sending it out to large format. So that's 24 by 36. But I don't want that. It's just to show you that you can do that. And sometimes it will do that and you don't want it to do that. So to make those changes, you go File, Document Settings, Document Setup. I want to change my drawing area to 1 horizontal page and 1 vertical. And I'm going to hit OK. And I'll hit OK just to show you. There's my 11 by 17. It's orientated with the center at the origin. So someone was asking, you can see that I have these grid lines. I personally don't like to draw with them. Sometimes I might, but most of the time I don't. So again, to make those changes, I go File, Document Settings, Document Setup. Under my drawing area is Drawing Grids. I'm going to want to change that, and there's sub-menus on the left-hand side. I'm going to choose the grid, and I want to turn off. Right now it says under Grid Options, it says Show Grid. I'm going to turn that off and hit OK. And OK. And right now, that is all we are going to touch with the document setup. So I have my units at feet and inches. I have my scale at 1/4 inch to a foot. I have my paper at tabloid or 11 by 17 in a landscape orientation. And I have my grid lines turned off.